Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick Turiano. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Arcadia. I'll be your host for today's webinar, which is the importance of data for sustainability reporting. This is the third webinar in our annual series, and we're very excited for our presentation today. Excuse me, sorry about that. So just a quick agenda. I'll be running through the introductions for our speakers, and then we'll have a special guest speaker to go through the current landscape of sustainability reporting. We're very excited for that. And then we'll be joined by two Arcadia executives that will help us walk through kind of Arcadia's platform vision, our primary product that we utilize to help our customers accomplish this, which is called Plug, some information about our partnerships and technical integrations, and then a more technical discussion around our data delivery methods and our roadmap, followed by a Q&A, which will be, you guys can access the Q&A directly through Zoom. All you have to do is type in your question and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. Next slide, excuse me, guys. Here we go. So our presenters for today, we're joined by Sarah Bloom Raskin. She's the former Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Alexa Minerva, who's our Vice President of Partnerships at Arcadia, as well as our Director of Product, Corrigan Nolan. And quickly, team, or everyone, sorry, I just wanted to quickly touch on kind of before we get to Sarah's guest speakership, we just wanted to talk about the current landscape of the policymakers and regulators in sustainability and carbon accounting ecosystem. There are many different standards out there, some based on region or industry. For example, we have the EU's CSRD, which stands for Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and even California has announced its own state guidelines. We'll see more and more like these probably come out, and that's what Sarah will probably discuss a little bit, including the SEC's recent ruling, which we'll dive deeper into shortly. But the important takeaway from this slide is that Arcadia will be ready to help navigate our partners and customers with the data requirements needed to meet all standards. For example, we're currently working to help with many partners and customers that have European operations. And so we're helping them with their data needs to help with the regulatory requirements in Europe, as an example. And so before we get into Sarah, I have the distinct honor of introducing our guest speaker today. Sarah Bloom Raskin is an attorney and financial markets policymaker who served as the 13th United States Deputy Secretary of the Treasury. Raskin previously served as a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. She also was Maryland Commissioner of Financial Regulation. She was a Rubenstein Fellow at Duke University. She's also a Senior Fellow at the Duke Center on Risk and currently the Colin W. Brown Distinguished Professor, the Practice of Law at Duke Law School, where she lectures on subjects such as climate change and financial markets. I think that's pretty important for this conversation. Business associations for like corporate law and partnerships, as well as law and financial anxiety. She also serves as a partner at Kea Partners, which is a climate advisory firm. And she'll be here with us to speak on the current state of climate sustainability reporting and the recent SEC ruling. Sarah?
Well, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Arcadia, for inviting me to talk to your distinguished audience. This is really one of the most timely topics you could actually imagine for where we are right now. What I'd like to do for a couple minutes before we engage in a discussion, and I hope it's a lively Q&A, is I want to kind of set the stage for sort of where climate finance policy sits right now and how it is really meshing with where we are from a climate perspective. So as many of you probably know, there is this 1.5 degree tipping point that essentially is approaching. Some would say that the pathway that the planet is on is actually one that is overshooting 1.5 degrees. But the science is telling us that 1.5 is the number that we need to be making sure our economies are moving towards. And the good news in this story is that while the trajectories are still climbing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, they are flattening. and they are flattening at a greater and greater pace, which is something that is positive from the perspective of what we need to do to really to make sure our economies continue to function the way they are. Stepping aside from the science for a minute, another way to imagine what is happening is that we're really in the midst of an energy transition, right? So now that, climate denialism, which has been and had been rampant for for quite a while, has started in most quarters, in most enlightened quarters, to dissipate. We are starting to see with this, dissipation and understanding really regarding what drives greenhouse gas emissions and the need to be clear-eyed about greenhouse gas emissions as being one of the primary drivers towards climate change. As a result of this, our economies, most particularly our advanced economies, are working actually, as you would imagine them to work, towards an energy transition, right? A transition that essentially moves an economy and many economies from being primarily fossil fuel based to a stage where you have a mixture of fossil fuels and other energy sources, to one ultimately where fossil fuels you have phased away from them. They have been phased out. And that transition is known as the energy transition. And people who study sort of big economic transitions are calling this particular transition sort of the biggest economic transition of economies since the Industrial Revolution. Okay, and well, none of us were around during the Industrial Revolution, but that was, essentially the movement from horses and buggies into into the combustion engine and into the use of machines. That was considered a fundamental and transformational economic change. This one, as energy mixes change, is considered really the next large one. And it's fascinating, by the way, for if there are any economic historians amongst you, to kind of look at these transformations and understand really how challenging they can be, how they lead to often inequitable impacts, how they do need a certain amount of managing in order to minimize collateral effects, but that ultimately, sort of when you're on the other side of it, you are in an economy that is working better, that is, in this case, meant to be a cleaner one. So what we're seeing in this transition, in this economic transition, is we're seeing households and we're seeing companies transitioning away from fossil fuels and moving towards alternatives. And when we say alternatives, we really mean different renewables. We mean solar, we mean hydro, wind, different mixes often. But the idea here is a movement in which more and more of our economy and our economic processes are powered by energy sources that are cleaner. So what this essentially means is that, that companies, their energy needs will start to come from, if they haven't already, come from a mixture of energy sources. And these energy sources will not just be the, oil and gas, but they will constitute other energy sources. And this is really what is meant when you hear people talk about the energy transition. Sometimes they call it the decarbonization transition. It comes in sort of different words, but it ultimately means this long trajectory in which the energy mixes of firms, as well as households, because households are also being given choices regarding how they essentially get their energy. So the pace at which that happens, how it happens, that is really known as sort of this transitional arc. and that is the arc that we are on in not just the US, but actually internationally as well. And of course, different market segments are on different parts of their journey. Different sectors have moved at different paces based on really the availability of these renewable sources to them. So that really is the sort of the big picture to what is going on right now. I want to say a couple of sort of more sort of targeted points here. One, when I use the words transitioning away, those aren't, I didn't make those up. Those are the words essentially that our international diplomats have come up with. So for those of you who are kind of in the weeds here on international climate policy, you'll know that every year the United Nations members get together and they talk climate. And at the latest climate meeting, which was held in December in Dubai, an agreement was forged, and that agreement essentially said that member countries would attempt to transition away from the use of fossil fuels. They would transition away. And those words were chosen with great deliberation, and countries all agreed to that. So the words transition away are the words essentially that we are, that we are operating under, and that really form the giant umbrella for what climate policy, how climate policy needs to evolve, and how we all need to sort of adapt to that to that ultimate reality. I also want to say, when we talk about the transition, you'll notice we're not saying, stop fossil fuel, stop oil and gas immediately. I mean, I think there's also an enlightened recognition that can't happen. You can't move, from away from an economy that has been powered with oil and gas for so long to one that, the next day it's all gone. There needs to be time. There needs to be essentially a transition. So in the near term, the projections really show a mix of energy sources before there is ultimately a mix that does not include oil and gas. So it's not it is truly a transition, and it's not one that is viewed to be something that is dramatic or drastic. And why is that? And let me say something really about the way in which a transition, why it is called a transition, and that's because it needs to be, it's viewed as something that actually should be handled or should emerge in a way that is equitable and a way that is orderly. So when you see these huge transitions, and I referred to this before, they're not always equitable, especially when they are completely market-based, and they're not always orderly as well. And there is a sense here that it would be much better if this transition could be both equitable and orderly. And for that reason, you have really an umbrella of climate policy around the world. And the climate policy slices really, anybody who engages in sort of climate finance policy knows that there are sort of different levels. So there's internationally, there's every country's own set of policies. And then there are very local and regional, and in our country, state and municipality level policies. So when you think about climate finance policy, it's really an umbrella. It's a real, umbrella that spans the international, the federal, the state, the local, the municipality. And you have to look at all of that to kind of discern, how particular sectors are going to move through this transition. And again, the goal here is to think of it in a way of how you maximize the equity of it and the orderliness of it, both of which, or either of which, could, if not done well or not emerging well, could create huge dislocations, huge costs as things move forward. So I want to say a couple of things about about these different slices of policy, kind of where they are now, and sort of the different flavors they come in. I want to say something. I'll say something about at the international level, what's happening at the federal level, and what's happening at the local level. And of course, I can't speak to to absolutely every country's set of policies, or certainly every locality's set of policies. But I'm urging you that when if you want to think about climate finance policy, that you try to open your minds to all levels, because that really constitutes will give you the full picture of what is happening. And what we see internationally is primarily driven by the United Nations, but is also, and in particular, the United Nations Framework on Climate Change, so the UNFCCC. That's kind of the group that is looking at many aspects of this transition. That is the group that has been focused really on this notion of transitioning away from fossil fuels. That group constitutes, though, the member countries. So the world, to the extent countries belong to the United Nations, they in essence belong to the UNFCCC as well. So internationally, that tends to be who you would look to for your climate policy. Federal level, you would look essentially at government, at the federal government's set of policies. So here in the US, that would be what is coming out of Congress, what is coming out of the different agencies that constitute our federal policy. In the US, that has been primarily the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which has really produced a whole host of, I would say, more carrots than sticks, but a lot of good carrots here for the development of EV and the development of solar, and also giving kind of step ups to companies that not only provide EV and solar, but do it in an equitable way, a way that brings into this notion of climate justice, where there needs to be, we need to make sure that there is a sort of a democratization of these solutions, that they are not just for the sort of the top, the richest sectors, but they're available in all communities. So that the IRA is primarily the vehicle of federal policy, climate finance policy in the US. Then I should say locally, you will see all sorts of really important and interesting regional efforts, regional incentives. There are also fights going on at the local level and the state level. So you'll see a host of states that kind of, are doing things to restrict the ability of fiduciaries to make investment decisions that essentially will encourage a kind of thinking in which climate risk and climate opportunities in these solutions are thought of as necessary investment. So all kinds of fights as well, really at all levels, but we see that at the local level. And then in the midst of all of this, and this is primarily, we see it at the state level and the federal level, is this notion of disclosure, of disclosing emissions. The idea here being that firms are now, the regimes of many countries are looking at this idea of letting shareholders, letting investors, letting households, letting the public know kind of what the greenhouse gas emission content is for their use of energy. The idea being that sort of knowledge here is power. Knowledge will actually help steer capital to kind of, cleaner options, but also will help households be able to make choices regarding what kind of power they want in their own homes, in their own midst. So it is the disclosure piece that kind of is sort of the latest flavor in the US, which comes with the SEC's climate risk disclosure rule. And we saw that come out in final form in March. We also have seen in the state level, California being a notable one, California being on the leading edge, really, of disclosures and what they look like. So you see at the state level, this notion of a disclosure regime starting to take shape. And of course, as we move into this idea of disclosing your emissions, we realize that many firms need sort of carbon accounting tools. They need ways in which to actually have the ability to disclose, to monitor, to be able to show what it is their footprints consist of. And of course, doing this is no easy matter in the sense that you've got to do it in a standardized way. I mean, if company A does it, with, by counting oranges, and, company B does it by counting apples, it's really not comparable. So the need for comparability is important, which means there need to be particular standards and a lexicon and a way in which everybody's measuring the same things in the same way. So carbon accounting becomes really an important tool, more and more so as more and more states, as well as the federal government, as well as other governments across the world, start putting in place mechanisms for how greenhouse gas emissions get monitored. Patrick mentioned that whole alphabet soup listing of different entities. Those are all part of the sort of the data ecosystem for reporting. And these are all initiatives, most of which are NGOs, non-governmental organizations that have come together in a way to create the right mechanisms that will essentially become the ways in which the measurement and the monitoring is done. And I think this is all commendable work. At some point, we're going to have to rationalize that whole alphabet soup so that companies and firms aren't too confused by them, and that's happening. That's also part of really the energy transition that we're in, which is the development of more harmonized standards, more harmonized ways of disclosing. So that is, that is the big picture here. I'm really actually anxious to hear, from Alexa as to kind of what Arcadia has to do with this. But that's the frame I think that we are dealing with really around the world, particularly in advanced economies. And I hope this is helpful in terms of giving you, also in your roles as, as private citizens, sort of what lies ahead here and what we're in the midst of from an economic energy perspective. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Sarah. So, we just heard Sarah speak a lot about transformation and disclosures. And I think one thing that's really sort of important to note here is that with all of that, there will be the need for new products, new services, new things to help these companies evolve and to help us evolve throughout this transformation. And really what's at the core of all of this is data. And that's a lot of what we'll be speaking about today. And so, throughout this entire journey, there is a need for data to help with audit assurance, goal setting, legal protection. I mean, the same level of scrutiny and integrity will be required as you are going about doing this level of reporting on emissions, as has been in financial markets. And so, that's really kind of what we're here to speak with you about today. Just moving on to the next slide here, for those of you that are in the weeds doing this for your companies every day or helping support different technology companies in this ecosystem, collecting the data that is necessary for this entire kind of transformation is very time consuming. It's difficult to get all that information. It's difficult to make it accurate, reliable, repeatable. And so really what Arcadia does is we help unlock access to all of that data. You see on the slide here just a couple examples of the different data fields that we pull in, but really we are seeking to help support the unlock of all of that data throughout the entire energy transformation across the entire energy journey. And we'll see in a slide or two here, actually, as I drill in a little bit more about kind of the decarbonization value chain that that we are supporting today, and will evolve and continue to support more of in the future. So on this next slide here, what you'll see here is the many different steps in the decarbonization value chain. So starting really with goal setting, right? And actually a little bit of what actually becomes before that even is really understanding where you're starting from. You need that benchmark to really be able to understand what sort of goals to set. And so you need data to do that, right? You have to understand where you are in order to figure out where you're going next. So really everything from goal setting to prospecting and analysis, which is used across different types of companies, to proposals, financing, optimization, all the way down to measurement and verification, which is really that ultimate reporting layer here. There is a very long chain here, and you'll see in a second here where kind of Arcadia fits in, but there's so much data that is required to be able to support all of these different stages and all these different silos across the decarbonization value chain. So really where Arcadia comes in here, we really feed the data that is required into all of those solutions and systems. So the solutions and systems are what will ultimately be supporting companies, consumers along this entire transformation that Sarah was speaking about earlier, right? So as I said, there will be different products and services and infrastructure that is required to be able to support this entire energy transformation. And the data that we have will be fed into those systems that support them. So, what we've really done here over the past couple of years is build out a partner ecosystem. There are many of you on the line here today that are part of that ecosystem, and hopefully more that will join, to really be able to look at the companies that are helping, both consumers as well as businesses do what they need to do to be able to help with decarbonization. So we are looking to build out that ecosystem. And we'll talk a little bit more later today with Corrigan about different ways to access data throughout this partner ecosystem. So just a little bit about what we do here overall at Arcadia for those that aren't aware. On the left-hand side here, what you'll see is kind of a representation of all, or not all, but a lot of the different data types that we do deliver across Arcadia. So everything from cost optimization data to tariff and rate data, interval data, and some other cool things coming soon with synthetics as well. And then in that middle section there, you'll just see that's kind of a repeat of all of the different layers across that decarbonization value chain. On the right-hand side, you'll see just the most common use cases that we support today. And there's a lot of sort of intersections between the data on the left and how that can ultimately support the different stages of decarbonization in that value chain, as well as the different use cases. You'll see on the right-hand side here some of the use cases, although the one we'll really kind of highlight and focus on today is carbon accounting. But really, I view carbon accounting as kind of that first step. You really, as I said, need to understand where you are to be able to figure out what you want to do next. And everything from commercial energy management to installing rooftop solar to optimizing electric vehicles, those are all actions that you will take once you understand kind of where you're starting here. So like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about carbon accounting in a moment here, but I want to give a bit of an overview on the next slide here for those that might not be aware of kind of the main kind of products that Arcadia offers. So the first one is Plug. That's really the foundational kind of usage and cost data, and that's really something that we help support on a global scale here. We're in about 50 countries. Signal is the next one, which is really has pricing data, and it's sort of a basic calculator that is based in North America that really helps collect all that tariff and rate information for companies to do everything from prospecting to making decisions about where to install batteries or solar, depending on the different assets in their portfolio. And then the last one really is Switch. That really allows you to create simulations of the impact of the various types of strategies that you might deploy to ultimately take action across your portfolio. Today, though, we're going to focus mostly on Plug. A couple more slides here, and then I promise I will pass it off to my colleague Corrigan here. But just taking a little bit of a deeper dive here into the carbon accounting use case. So essentially what Arcadia is doing is we are helping collect via utility credentials or through copies of bills, access to all of that statement and meter level data. That data then ultimately gets fed into different carbon accounting and also actually energy analytic platforms that we have built across our ecosystem to be able to help with primarily goal setting and that measurement and verification process. So like I said, we've really built out these connections to make it easier for corporate customers to be able to access that data to then use across these different platforms. And instead of having to do your own development work, we've really kind of made it a simple sort of turnkey solution there. So how does this work? This is a bit of an illustration of sort of what I was just mentioning here, but essentially customers, meaning like the corporate customer, will either have utility credentials and web portals, or they'll have copies of bills. And either way, all of that information really gets put into Arcadia system. We standardize, we normalize. You heard Sarah speak about the need for standardization to be able to look at these massive troves of data. We normalize and audit all of that data. I believe we run something like 600 audits across the data. And we take all of that data, and then that data ultimately gets fed into the platform of your choice. And that's really where the partner ecosystem comes into play here. That data is ultimately put into the systems for you to take action on, right? And so we really try to make it easy for the corporate customer to ultimately get the data they need, but have it at their fingertips to access wherever it is that they need to be doing business. Just a couple logos here, just to show you some of our partners. We really are seeking to build a large partner ecosystem, not just here, but also globally as well. As you heard Sarah mention, there's a lot of different regulations that are being put in place, not just in the United States, but in Europe, CSRD, and others that I assume will follow suit as well. And so because our data is global in nature, we are looking to build those partnerships with all of the different companies that we believe to be best in class, so that all the corporate customers can engage with our data wherever they need to. Last thing here, just wanted to mention kind of a use case here, or a case study here. So, we work with hundreds of different corporate customers, and this is just an example of one of the largest racing companies that we worked with. They were looking about last year, I believe it was, to get really a carbon baseline. And they had a lot of different locations. They wanted to really figure out how they could create some efficiency here, accuracy, and really create a repeatable process for them on an annual ongoing basis. So they worked closely with us and one of our partners, which happened to be ServiceNow. And essentially we helped them streamline that entire process. And now they're really set up, after doing a little bit of the upfront work, they're set up now to have all of that data fed into ServiceNow system via our partner ecosystem to be able to do this, this kind of reporting on an annual basis. So just one example of a company that has had a lot of success in working with us. There's a lot of others. Important to note that while we do tend to see some a little bit more interest, I would say, from certain industries, we help support across a variety of industries, a lot of different geographies, different verticals. And so really, we try to meet you where you are and help support regardless of what industry you're sitting in. So that said, I'm going to pass it over to Corrigan. Corrigan is one of our directors of product, as Patrick mentioned at the beginning here, but I'll let him drill a little bit more into the data access methods and some of the other really innovative new offerings that we have today that are really highly relevant for more of that ESG use case and for some of the folks probably on the line here today.
Thanks, Alexa. So now that we've got a pretty good understanding of the landscape, some of the problems that we're all facing, and even a great overview on our solutions and what we're doing about it today, I'm going to take us and dig a little deeper on what our products are, how they work, how they might fit into the picture of ESG reporting / carbon accounting. And then at the end of this, if there's time, I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking ahead and covering what's on our roadmap. So to start things off, let's talk about our product Plug. So Alexa had already mentioned this before, but Plug is our product. It collects high resolution energy and water data, and it is the foundation to ESG reporting or carbon accounting. And the reason I say it's foundational is because even if you've got the most powerful reporting tool on the market, it all needs to start with the data. If you don't have data in the system, then your reporting tool is effectively useless. And not only do you need data, but you need data in a way that is reliable. You need data in a way that's cost effective. You need it in a way that's scalable and accurate. And so that is what Plug is here to help with. The way that it works is fairly simple. It's a 3-step process. Step 1 is you're going to connect your accounts or the source. And we have 2 primary ways of doing this. Way number 1 is through credentialed access. So you're giving us permissioned access through the utility provider to collect data on your behalf. And then the other is through uploading PDF copies of the bill. After we get access to the data, the next step is the collection piece. This happens all behind the scenes. This is where we go in initially and we collect 12 months of historical data so that you can benchline all future progress against that. And then we also will go in and with all the data we collect, we standardize, we will audit it to make sure the data quality is there. And then we move into step 3, which is about delivery. So let's double click with the next slide into step 3. And that's making the data available, because at the end of the day, that's for those on the call, it's probably what matters the most to you. And specifically what matters most is, what data is being made available in this way and how is it being made available. So the plug data model consists of about 200 different data points that come off of the bill. Don't let that number scare you, because really only a handful of them are required for ESG reporting or carbon accounting. And then we've got a list of those right here in the center of the slide. And so to kind of go over from a high level, once you connect your credential or you upload, let's say, a summary bill, the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to identify all of those accounts associated with it. Then once we have an understanding of those accounts, we'll dig in a layer deeper and we'll take a look at those meters, because in the meters, the more granular element, that's what we really care about and how we want to measure information, because roughly a good rule of thumb is you're going to have about 1 meter per building. So that's going to tell you what your per building consumption looks like for each service type. Sometimes you'll get more than 1 meter per building. So we'll pull all that information. We'll give the standard ESG carbon accounting data points that you'd expect to get, like total consumption, like the interval period, your billing cycle, et cetera, what units. Those are the necessary ones to figure out what your emissions are. But then we also include some information like costs, so that you can tie the economic benefit to the sustainability initiatives that you're working on. So you can show to all your shareholders and your stakeholders that, look, we did 10 sustainability initiatives this year, and as a result, we saved the company X number of dollars and have affected the bottom line. So we found a lot of people are really interested in that. And we also allow the ability to tie all of the data that we're collecting to sites or locations. So this lets you see, a roll up asset to asset. What does all of your consumption look like across the board over time? And we provide the information in an easy view way. Moving from what data is available to how we make it available, there are several ways to access this data, from APIs to a pre-built dashboard to a new product we'll talk a little bit about called Data Hub. And then also we have pre-built integration into partner products. So to start off, let's talk about those partner products for a second. Yeah, we can stay on the slide. And then if you're looking for something that will just work out of the box, I'd say going with the partner products is the route to go. But what you will gain in time to value, you'll lose in terms of control, because the partner product is usually they're one size fits all solution. So what you're looking for is you're looking for more control, or you have a reporting tool that isn't necessarily integrated with us yet. Which, by the way, if you have that, come talk to us, because our vision is to be in every built into every reporting tool that is out there. So we would love an introduction to start building a relationship with that tool that you're using, so that we can be integrated. But if you don't have one, then there are other solutions that you can take advantage of. One of which would be our dashboard. The next slide. So you could think about the plug dashboard as an admin dashboard that you can use for managing your connections, but it could also be used to access all of the data that's collected. Like the partner solutions, this also works out of the box. However, a lot of our partners and customers end up using the plug dashboard in tandem with the API or a different solution, where they use the dashboard to manage and the API for automating whatever process they have, because of the dashboard, there's not a lot of room for automation there. Next up is the APIs. So with the plug APIs, this is where you're going to get the most control, but it will also come with the most amount of work. So to those APIs, they're on the opposite end of that control versus time to value spectrum. This is going to be ideal for teams that have a lot of development capacity, so we'll be able to work with those APIs and build your custom solutions. It is ideal for those who want to integrate our solution into multiple tools. So let's say not only do you want to use this for sustainability reporting, but you'd like our data to feed into your account payable system, and facility management system, et cetera. Then our APIs are flexible and would allow you to do exactly that. And they also allow you to deal with, if you've got very specific corner cases that you'd like tighter control over, then I would say the APIs are the way to go. Next is the Plug Data Hub. This is a brand new product that actually launched this month. And it sits in the middle between partner connections and using the API in terms of time to value and how simple the data that is returned can be. So Data Hub is, requires no effort or very, very low effort to be able to use. There are two ways to get data from Data Hub. One is through the Snowflake data share directly. And then the second is through file delivery, where we will simplify the file and all of the data we've collected, and we will deliver it via CSV to an SFTP folder of your choosing, where you can then ingest it. So one of the big benefits of Data Hub is it was built with ESG in mind. And we've taken all of those data points and we've simplified it. We've handled, there are some corner cases out there that we've managed to handle and help simplify. So Data Hub and the partner solutions is actually where, assuming you're not working with an SI and you've got very unique problems that you're trying to solve for, I recommend to everyone I talk to that they start by considering Data Hub and some of our partner solutions, because it's best to get a quick win first. And then handle corner cases with more complex solutions later is a crawl, walk, run approach. Next, we'll talk about interval data. So interval data is also available. This is ideal for if you want a shorter delay between consumption and reporting, meaning you want days behind days behind information, so that you can quickly react to situations as they arise in terms of managing your consumption. And you can also use the interval data to also tie in tariffs if you're using a dynamic tariff plan, and you want to do cost optimization and focus on taking costs and factoring into that into your prioritization when you're picking sustainable initiatives to pick up. That's interval data. Last but certainly not least is Signal. Signal is a product that is separate from Plug and focuses more on modeling tariff data instead of the actual consumption data. This is great for those who are interested in trying to tie business value to the emission reduction projects as well. We model over 4,000 different utilities, 17,000 different tariffs. So it's very extensive. We handle everything from the complexity of NEM to simple residential tariffs. But what you could do is you could take this tariff data, tie it to your consumption, and then see what the resulting costs would be and how that might affect, or how your sustainability initiatives might affect those costs. Looking ahead on the roadmap, next slide. Looking ahead on the roadmap, we've got a number of things that we're excited to announce that are releasing. The first is Data Hub. So Data Hub, I'd mentioned, was launched this month, but we are going to be adding more and more capabilities to Data Hub here in the near future. The first up is adding cost data. So I mentioned it is very geared towards ESG initially. We're expanding what it's capable of handling, starting with factoring in and showcasing the costs associated with your consumption. Next is, so on the Plug dashboard, we'll be adding more advanced searching to be able to better search and filter on the data, so you can quickly create custom reports and pass that along to internal stakeholders just using our out-of-the-box tool. Next, we'll be expanding our coverage through the addition of multi-factor authentication support. There aren't many providers yet that have require multi-factor authentication today. However, there are a few that do, and we want to make sure that we're able to support those as having multi-factor does not change whether or not the provider is recording consumption data, which should factor into your ESG report. Next, we have synthetic interval data. This is one we're really excited about. That's going to be where we're creating, through AI, creating very accurate and more granular usage estimates based on building profiles. So you put in the basic information about your building, and then we'll give you what the interval data should look like to a high degree of accuracy there. This again will be beneficial for those who are interested in interval data, but we may not have the interval coverage necessary to give you that view across all of your buildings. And then last but certainly not least is data auditing enhancements. So we're improving what the takeaway for data auditing enhancements is that we're improving the first time accuracy of collecting data. So through the use of AI machine learning, we'll be able to handle new connections more quickly and get you up and running more quickly with the new data. And that is it for the roadmap. Thank you all for listening.
Awesome, Corrigan. Before we formally start the Q&A session, I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows how to do it. If you look in your Zoom panel, you'll find a Q&A button, and I think you could expand that or open that, and you should be able to type in your questions. With that, we did have a couple questions come in. Sarah, are you okay to take a couple questions we have from the audience, if that's okay? All right, great. So one question we received is, do you expect other states like California to create new regulations?
Yes, is that to me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so that's it's a terrific question. I've got to say it's hard to know whether other states will, but California has really always been a sort of a leader in on the greenhouse gas emission side, and so it didn't surprise many people that California did put one in place. My sense is that there will be others that. In particular, the SEC rule, which is, covers every state because it's a federal rule, has some holes in it. So there are holes from the perspective of not covering certain kinds of companies of a certain size, or having particular ways in which some companies need to disclose that states might want to address in a different way. So my sense is that there are going to probably be some more to come. And there's also, I should say, some legal challenge going on with the SEC's climate risk disclosure rule. So that might be another thing to think about in terms of what states are doing. States, again, you remember I said to look at regional and state efforts in particular around, in this space, because things could happen. And so, yes, the answer is there could be more.
And one more related question, if we could sneak it in for you.
Sure.
Typically SEC is usually a governing body for publicly traded companies. Do you expect this to kind of be a catalyst for more private company regulation at a federal level?
Yes, so that's another great question. And yes, the SEC's jurisdiction does not extend into companies that are not publicly traded. Okay, so in particular, in their disclosure 1933 Act to 1934 Act jurisdiction. So for that reason, the SEC's rules are not. Again, they're not going to cover absolutely every company. There's also some size issues that the SEC has imposed here in terms of who needs to do this. And there are also some lags in time in terms of when companies need to start complying. So that said, the SEC kind of sets the pace. So once you see an SEC rule out there, companies generally take note. Okay, they don't typically say, "Oh, well, that's not, that doesn't really apply to us," because they see what the trends are that are developing around publicly traded companies. And so many firms, and you see this even now, are beginning quite privately. They're not under any rule requiring them to do this, but are very interested for themselves doing start doing monitoring over greenhouse gas emissions. So you start to see it. It's harder to quantify, to kind of know that it's happening, because again, they don't need to do this reporting, but from sort of corporate behavior, they tend to do it. Their investors a lot of times ask them to do it. Will say, I know we're not, they might say, I'm an investor in this company. I know you're not required to do this, but I'd kind of like to know what's going on from a greenhouse gas emission perspective. So can you, provide some information to me as an investor like that? And that's another reason why you start to see the expectations kind of grow beyond what the rule might strictly require.
Okay, awesome. Corrigan, I think this one might be for you. Looks like granular tariffs data are captured within Signal. Similarly, are there more granular GHG emission factors captured within Plug to help with GHG reporting?
Great question. So let me break down what it might mean to be a more granular emission factor. So there are a lot of emission factors out there that are going to be more time-based, where depending on the time of day, if it's peak, off peak, then you can have a different emission factor associated with it. So I've seen that. And Plug would be capable of supporting that with the interval data attached to it. Now, the factors themselves, those are going to be BYO, for lack of a better word. So if you have, say, an emission factor that is more granular that you'd like to use and pull in, you absolutely can. We just want to make sure that it gets paired with the correct data. So another way that emission factors, you might want to take a different, more granular look at it is, let's say that you're in a rider program or something that might affect the emission factor you want to apply. We do also collect multiple fields which might indicate that you are in such a program that you could key off of in that event. So short answer long, yes, we have the data that you would need to use more granular emission factors, but we don't have those factors themselves.
Okay, great. Corey, we're going to keep you rolling if that's okay. Can you expand a little bit more on synthetics? I know you described on it. Is there anything more you can elaborate on?
Yeah, so let's see. So synthetics are, like I said, interval data, and the intended purpose behind synthetics is to help fill in the gaps where real interval data doesn't exist. And what we've done is, as you can imagine, with a company with as much energy data as we have, we've trained models based off of key indicators for a building, like where it's located, size, type of building, et cetera. And based off of those indicators, we can model what consumption would be expected to look like for each of those buildings. So it's effectively interval data that isn't necessarily measured. Instead, it's estimated using our large amount of data that we've collected over the years.
Awesome. And one more question. This one's about interval data. Can you elaborate on how to access that or how to get it?
Yeah. So interval data is coming to Plug, and in order to access it, right? It's I'd say, Alexa, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're treating it as a standalone product and not an add-on. So it's perfect. Thank you. So it is a standalone product. If you're interested in getting access to it, there's going to be API and dashboard access to this data, much like the data, the monthly utility billing data that you're able to access through Plug today. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely reach out to us. We'd love to set up some time and review it with you.
Okay. Last call for questions, everyone. We are getting close to time. Looks like one just came in. Give me 1 second. Can you please elaborate more on partnerships with other platforms like Watershed, ServiceNow? How do those integrations work? I think, Alexa, that is.
Yeah.
So it really does depend on the partner. We have some that are leveraging Data Hub, which is the new product that Corrigan was just walking through. Some of them have developed against our API. We even have some kind of more legacy partners that are leveraging a file export. So it's really up to the partner, to decide the way that they would like to receive the data. That said, we obviously do have best practices. And so we work with each partner based on their resources, their budget, the volume they expect to drive together to really come up with a plan and figure out what the best match is there. So if I don't know who that question came in from, but if it's from someone that's interested in becoming a net new partner, happy to speak to you, or if or a corporate customer interested in more about our partner ecosystem, feel free to reach out to me directly as well.
Excellent. Well, team, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Again, thank you very much for attending this webinar. Be on the lookout for more emails from Arcadia on future topics that we'll be launching as part of this series. Again, thank you again for your attending. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any sales or product person that you might have been in contact with. We'll be more than happy to reply to you. We have years and years of experience and tons of personnel on staff here that can help you with all of your utility and energy data needs and questions. So thank you again for that. Corrigan, Alexa, and Sarah, thank you very much for your participation as well. Thank you, everyone.